There we are. Good morning, everyone. I hope that you all have had a chance to look at the October minutes and or this agenda I sent out last week. I've changed a couple things while I was doing a little bit of research this morning for this discussion that I hope will be somewhat lively later. But that's the only thing that's changed. But before we get to that, does anybody have any corrections or questions, concerns about our October minutes? I had the link in the prior email. I suppose I can pull them up real quick. That's the one thing I did not pull up. Let's see, cataloging committee minutes, October. Okay, here we go. Just take a brief look through.
John, this is Dia. I don't remember seeing anything amiss, so I would move that we approve them as presented.
Okay, do I have a second? John George says agreed. Was that for minutes, John? Yes, John George and Lisa second. Great. Okay. Unless there's any further discussion, speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, hearing nothing, the minutes, assuming Tracy doesn't have any objections to the minutes. Good morning, Tracy. Heather will be recording the minutes for this session. She's on the desk at the moment, so she'll be recording them later after she watches the videos. So that's a good reminder to me to try and vocalize everything that's happening, especially over here in the chat. I oftentimes neglect the chat. My apologies for doing that. Okay, so this discussion topic began last week with an email by Anna Lim, actually, and she had a question about deceased author in the title field. And let me pull up my search results. I'll tell you what I'm talking about here. Now, I just did a keyword. No, I didn't. I did a title starts with Tom Clancy search, and this is what came up here. And we have, as you'll see, a lot of different opinions as to how we handle a book that is written by a new author based on characters or a series from an old author. Here we see this looks like a subfield A, subfield P, and then we have just all subfield A, subfield B here, subfield P here. That's a part of a series. Here we have just the book title, no Tom Clancy. Same here. A Jack Ryan Jr. novel, but no Tom Clancy. No Tom Clancy. That's the Amazon series. Here's more Tom Clancy, period. I'll just open one of these up just for grins to take a look and see what it looks like. Tom Clancy, subfield A, subfield P, Oath of Office by Mark Cameron, read by Scott Brick. So, what do we do with that? Now, there is existing policy for series information in the title proper, in that in Sage, we do not include series information in the title proper unless it's graphic or manga. And that information is included in the series document that was compiled at the beginning of this year. But this is not the same thing, is it? Because we have a deceased author, but that doesn't necessarily imply a certain series, does it? Because of course Tom Clancy has quite a few different series, as does Robert B. Parker, which we see that one, right? And as a matter of fact, that's the example in the series document, which I'll pull up right now. Okay. Deceased authors and continued series. Okay, so we're going to go down here and look at the example that's given here. This is Robert B. Parker's Wonderland, written by Ace Atkins. Now, the series document contains information on what to do with the entries, right? So we have, this is what we're going to do in the 100 field and the 700 field, and what we're going to do in these series fields, 490 and 800. But does it include information on what to do in the title proper 245 field? Now there is an entry here, but not necessarily instructions, as is appropriate, right? Because this is the series document. This is not a document on specifically 245 title proper fields as it relates to deceased authors, just series information. Are you all with me so far? Have I lost anybody yet? Anybody lost?
I'm following. Good.
Okay, I've not lost you yet. I'm trying my darndest to lose everybody, but if what I say is going over your head or just doesn't make sense, just let me know. Stop me. Let me know. Okay. So the question is, what do we do here? Because we're seeing a bunch of different opinions on what to do with it in the catalog, right? Okay. Well, let's go pull up. First, I'm going to pull up my agenda, and I'm going to show you these parts in RDA in just a second. And I want, the reason I'm bringing this up is not necessarily to draft policy. I want you to understand. I want to know what everybody is thinking, and I want to solicit opinions, and I want to just get us thinking about this. That's the purpose of this discussion today, okay? So for those of you, like me, who want, tell me the way to do it, I will do it from here on out. I'm sorry to disappoint you, because that is not what you are going to come away with from this discussion. So my apologies for that frustration. However, y'all are smart people. I want to know what you are thinking of that I may have missed. But I've written down these three possibilities, and these aren't the only possibilities, in looking through RDA to possibly handle this. Agent, integral part of the title, introductory words, role clarification in statement of responsibility. So let's take a look at number one. This is RDA 2315. And for those of you more versed in AACR2 than I am, I would solicit your opinions as well if you can provide additional clarification that I can't. For the time being, I'm just going to look up in the toolkit. So number one, agent. That's clarification of role. Let's go up here. Where was it? 2, 3. Variant title, serials, multi-part monograph, other title. Sorry, folks. If I had my, what was it? 2, 3. I'll just look at it. 2315. Okay, almost there. 2, 3. 1, 4, 2, 3, 1, 5. Names of agents. Okay, if the title consists solely of the name of an agent, which that's not the case. We have other information besides the name of an agent. But look at this. If A title includes a name that would normally be treated either as part of a statement of responsibility or as the name of a publisher distributor. Okay, we would think Tom Clancy would be a responsible agent, right? And the name is an integral part of the title. Okay, well, that's a bit subjective. Then record the name as part of the title. So, and here's the examples they give. Marlowe's plays Eileen Ford's A More Beautiful You in 21 Days. There's some other stuff. Now, we've seen this before, right? The example was Robert B. Parker's Wonderland, which looks kind of like this, right? So that seems to match there. What do we do with Tom Clancy? That is one option, and we saw that in several of the results. And for what it's worth, I might add that most of the results in OCLC take this approach. Tom Clancy, whatever the title is. However, let's take a look and see. Here's the second one that I wrote down. Introductory words. Do not transcribe words that serve as an introduction and are not intended to be part of a title. Is it intended to be part of a title? Sleeping Beauty. This is, we see this in movies all the time, right? Disney presents, well, Warner Brothers Productions proudly presents, blah, 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 blah. Mel Bay presents Southern Mountain Guitar. Welcome to Oklahoma's official website. I don't know. Does anybody think that Tom Clancy is meant to be introductory words? Have I lost you yet? This one didn't really convince me, but especially this example right here kind of seems like that. But
yeah, I don't think it correlates to our example.
It seems to me that Tom Clancy is a more important part of the title than Disney Presents or Mel Bay Presents, right? Is it an integral part of the title? It's the language in RDA is vague here. Is it a catalog or judgment? What's integral as far as title goes? Well,
I think it's integral. I mean, it's drawing attention to the fact that it's Tom Clancy. So.
And I also think that because of the possessive on the S, rather than the word designating presents, it's like gives him ownership. And following up with Beth, between the ownership and we want to make, the author wanted to make sure that the audience knew it was indeed Tom Clancy's. Yes?
Like this, right? I mean, we see that same possessive in this example here, right?
Exactly.
Do we see that?
That's ownership.
Do we see that here? Not really.
No.
Not at all, actually.
However, most of those do not say Tom Clancy's. They say Tom Clancy.
You are right. There are examples of both. So, in some series or maybe some forms, there's Tom Clancy. Here we have two Tom Clancy's, but that Tom Clancy, Tom Clancy, Tom Clancy, Tom Clancy.
Would that be a situation where we just make sure that we use the title page or the publisher stuff in the...
Right, now...
Because sometimes, sometimes you see how when you bring in a record and it isn't done exactly right or how we want it done, and since we haven't really discussed this before, are we just taking what's coming in instead of putting it the ownership part? I don't know. I haven't done enough of these. I'm enjoying looking at the cleanup, though.
Well, you raise two good points, actually. The first one being, this is just the cover, right? And this isn't our preferred source of information, which would be on the title page. Which is a good point. I mean, if there's a discrepancy between what's on the cover and what's on the title page, we would go with what's on the title page. I can't tell because I don't have these books necessarily right in front of me. The second point that you raise is that the instructions, or RDA's instructions regarding transcription versus recording, right? We do transcription for titles in RDA, the take what you see approach that we see much more common in RDA than we do in AACR2. Transcribing what's on the title page, take what you're given, as opposed to recording like we do in the physical description, for example. We record that information as opposed to transcribing it. It's up here in the general guidelines, record what's on the title page, but that's the other point that you bring. So do we, if we see a discrepancy between the book in hand title page versus the record that we're bringing in, right? As honest catalogers, we got to go with transcribing what's on the title page. Unless we're doing it in AACR2.
And just for clarification, I just looked up to verify AACR2, and it basically is along the same lines as RDA at this point.
As far as transcribing title proper?
Yes.
Okay.
It says almost exactly the same.
Okay.
With actually the same examples.
Oh. Well, that's
funny thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I don't know if it's like one of the first things up here at RDA. Source of information, recording title. Yeah. Transcribe a title as it appears on the source of information. That's really, really easy to say, isn't it? And they've got some examples right here. None of them really indicating the type of scenario we're talking about. But, oh, I just transcribe what I see. Well, okay, sometimes it gets sticky, like in these two, right? Exceptions, introductory words, you already talked about that. Now, I'll do this quickly, but the other option that might have some validity is statement of responsibility role clarification, which is down here 2417, which is where I was. 2417. Clarification of role. Add a word or short phrase if necessary to clarify the role of an agent named in a statement of responsibility. Indicate that the information was taken from a source outside the manifestation itself. Now, we do see this from time to time, right? I don't know how to pronounce that. Somebody who's smarter than me might know how to pronounce that. Baijun, is that how you pronounce that? Ballads collected by Chet Williams. Title proper. This is what the title proper says, and then that's the statement of responsibility. And so they've added this word here as clarification. And when we add, according to the series document, when we add entries for deceased authors, let me bring that up. Sometimes you'll see, it's not in this example here, but sometimes you'll see the relator term, Robert B. Parker, and then dates, and then subfield E, creator. If we were to look through the search results, we would find quite a few of those. So that's kind of like that, although that is relegating Tom Clancy out of the title proper and into the statement of responsibility, which is, at least to me, quite a departure from the take what you see RDA instructions. But we do occasionally make exceptions in SAGE, and that would need to be a SAGE policy exception thing if we were to do that. But I mean, I read that and thought, well, is Tom Clancy a part of the statement of responsibility, or is it part of the title proper, part of both? Anyway, anybody have any thoughts on that, or did I just further confuse people? Is Tom Clancy part of the statement of responsibility? I mean, he didn't write the book, but he created the series, created the characters, created the franchise.
Actually, kind of goes both ways because he is part of the creator of the concept.
Right. So if he is, should he be part of both then? Is he an agent, integral part of the title, as well as the statement of responsibility? I mean, does he then get put in the statement of responsibility alongside whoever the author is with a role clarification term?
It all gets sticky, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's not, like I say, we're not going to decide necessarily today how we're going to handle this, but I mean, it is something we need to talk about, to think about, and I love to hear other people's opinions besides my own, because oftentimes I hear something that makes more sense than what I'm thinking. But I mean, certainly, and I'd encourage you all, we won't necessarily do this now, but do this search on your own sometime and just see the different opinions that we get. Now, one of them that is not part of the three I came up with is this idea of subfield P, which I didn't quite understand. Because if you have a subfield P, you are saying that Oath of Office is a part of Tom Clancy. And does that make sense to people? It doesn't necessarily make sense to me, because I mean, this would indicate, well, that's both part of the title proper. But if you were going to go this way, it would seem to make more sense to have a colon and then subfield B, Oath of Office, maybe? I'm not sure. I just want, does anybody understand this better than I do, is what I'm guessing. Or are you just as confused as I am?
I guess I would concur with your line of thinking. It doesn't seem that P is appropriate. And I think the more we can be consistent, the better off we are in the catalog.
So if you see this, you see a book come in and the title of the book is a subfield P, but the title, the subfield A title is not really a title at all. I don't know. I would ask a mentor is what I would ask, because I'm sure we're going to continue this discussion and get some more opinions. But this, I mean, this might be a distant fourth option, but in my mind, it just doesn't seem to make as much sense as at least number 1 and number 3. I think we've decided number 2 doesn't apply. But John, you had a comment about Sherlock Holmes. The new Sherlock Holmes books seem to have Sherlock Holmes in the 245, not Conan Doyle. So is Conan Doyle a part?
He's the original author.
Well, I know that, but is he part of the statement of responsibility? Does he just have entries? Is he anywhere in the record?
Well, let's see. I'm looking at WorldCat. Just a sec. Those are films. Those don't really help. That's the problem with Sherlock Holmes, is there's everything you could possibly imagine.
Right.
One of them's attributed to Basil Rathbone, of course, and let's see. That doesn't even mention Sir Arthur Conan Doyle at all.
I would think at the very least he would have a.
He should have a 700, but
creator, right?
yeah.
and probably a few notes if he's not included in the statement of responsibility or the title. But
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not seeing. I can't remember off the top of my head. Oh, here's one. Let's see.
do you have one for?
Well, I don't know if we have it. Like I said, I was looking at WorldCat, but let me see if I can find one. I'll come back.
Okay. Just to make life more frustrating,
Mhm.
I found this one. Take a look at this. Tom Clancy's, now this is, of course, the cover, not the title page. Tom Clancy's Op Center. Mirror image, written by Jeff Rubin. Now, remember before we said how we don't have series? Now, this says Tom Clancy's Op Center, which is series. So if we decide that we're keeping Tom Clancy, do we keep this even though this is a specific series, or does that get relegated?
John,
Yes.
in that situation, okay, and I know probably the least of all of us here, but my common sense thing, or the Tom Clancy's Op Center, this is where we would use LOC and see how the series was traced, because cleaning up the series on the side of the page would be like my first goal. And so with this being Tom Clancy's Op Center, go and see how it's actually traced. And if it's not traced that way, then we would know it's part of the title, or vice versa. If it is traced that way, we know we can drop that part, make it the series tracing, put the mirror image as the title. Jeff is the owner or responsibility, and then Tom gets another 700. Yes or no? Plus the double 800 series tracing, one for the author that's actually writing it, and one for the series it started to continue from.
Right.
It's a lot of work.
We're thinking, at least I'm thinking, I don't know, off the cuff, that Op Center, Tom Clancy is going to have his own series of Op Center books.
Traced one way or the other, either
Right.
Op Center, I guess they'd all be 800s. One would be Tom Clancy's Op Center, the other one would be Tom Clancy author, title Op Center. So it could be traced a couple of ways, I guess, through LOC.
Yeah, so if we get our entries straightened out,
Right.
what do we do with our title? Then is the question. Our 245 statement
Would be the mirror image. And then I would put I would probably put a 246 in there with a $I title from cover, Tom Clancy's Op Center mirror image. But you still have that tracing.
Well, you raise another good point there, in that we all understand that for additional clarification on all of these, we would probably be putting 246 variant titles to help out searching, right? So that whichever way ends up being the sage way, if Tom Clancy ends up being in the title proper, we'd put a 246 with just the book title. Or vice versa, if it ends up like this, then there should be a 246 with Tom Clancy in it. Or do we agree on that? I'd hope so.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was waiting for general agreement.
No, I was too. Yeah.
Okay.
Just for grins, and we're going to move on to the other reminders
search
in
it.
just a minute. But yeah, I mean, we can look and see. Of course, Library of Congress, they sometimes trace, sometimes not trace, right? Thank you, Library of Congress. So if I go, I'm just going to pull up everything by Tom Clancy here. And if we go down to, what was it? Op Center, right? We have foreign language references here, but do we have anything authorized for Op Center? We don't, do we? Let's see if doubt I'm going to find Jeff Rovin Ops Center, but who knows what I'm going to find, right? Right, Jeff? Is that his first name? Jeff? Jeff Rovin. Okay. Tom Clancy's Ops Center, but nothing authorized. So, Library of Congress didn't trace either one.
However, it might just be under Ops Center as well.
That's true. That was the next search I was going to do. With a hyphen. Ops Center.
It is on Fantastic Fiction under Ops Center.
Under.
Well, under Tom Clancy's Ops Center.
Okay.
And I put the link in the chat.
Does Jeff Rovin have? Let me see. Let's go find. Open your link here. Tom Clancy's Ops Center, continued from the original series by Tom Clancy. That makes sense. So I don't suppose. I mean, are they going to have Jeff Rovin's?
Mm-hmm. He was up at the top.
Oh, did I miss it? Tom Clancy's Ops Center. God of War, Tom Clancy's Ops Center, book 19.
Which is on that prior list.
Which is on this one. So they continue. Well, let's see. So are all of these?
By different people.
All of these are written. So Tom Clancy only wrote the first one?
I think so.
Is that what I'm seeing?
I'm pretty sure. I remember when the first one came out, because I picked it up, but I never actually got a chance to read it. Yeah, because it was originally done. Yeah.
So in this case, we would use. In our 800 field, we would use, Tom Clancy and dates and Ops Center. But when we get here, boy, he only wrote the first one. 19 books, and he only wrote the first one.
Yeah, and the first one was actually partnered with somebody else too.
Yeah. So then we have for all of these, we then have two 800 fields.
Mm-hmm.
And, but the original question was in 245, since Tom Clancy's Ops Center is series information, and we don't include series information, we include the title of the book in the title proper 245 in Sage. What do we do with Tom Clancy's Ops Center? Do we just take it out of the 245, or do we keep it in 245? I mean, it is series. It qualifies under series information, right? Or
it does, but it also is predominantly featured on the title page.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but oftentimes series is 2. And I know there are going to be times when it seems like our Sage policy of relegate series information, with the exception of manga and graphic novels, relegate series information to the series statement and series entries, not in the 245. There's going to be times when that conflicts with RDA, take what you see. So we're trying to find some consistency here, and, you got to go to the extremes, like this one. We're not going to see this all the time, but how do we define our policy? But anyway, the fun things we get to do as catalogers. Is anyone thoroughly confused? Checked out? Anybody? Does anybody else have any more opinions that they didn't get to voice? No opinions amongst catalogers. What? Wow. Okay.
I think that there's, pros and cons of both approaches, and I'm trying to think, how would the patron look for this? Um,
Yeah, I mean, certainly the patron, we could guess, would be more, not in the case of Op Center necessarily, because he only wrote one book, but in a big series where he wrote a lot of books, they're gonna attach his name to that particular series, and so we could suppose that when they're doing searching, that they're going to include that um, as part of their searching. And whether or not the search results come up in a way that's going to benefit them is a question. But
Well, usually at the desk when people are asking to put things on hold, they're not asking for Tom Clancy, blah, blah, blah.
they're asking for the next book in the Jack Ryan series.
Right, or if they've taken it from inside the book, it's just the actual book title. It's not Tom Clancy dot other stuff.
And certainly in the case of Op Center, give me the next book in Tom Clancy's Op Center series. I don't think anyone's going to hear that, but maybe, I don't know.
I doubt it.
So more discussion to follow there. I'm sure the mentor committee is going to talk about that. But feel free to email me. If you have a stroke of inspiration later and you're like, oh, we forgot about this, or what about this? I love to hear those. So by all means, send me an email if you come up with something, any new revelations or visions. Yeah, Perry, patrons are probably going to ask for the series character, right? Which is oftentimes, libraries will put their series based on characters, popular characters. Sometimes we do that in our library as well.
And that kind of goes back to the Sherlock Holmes 600 for fictional character, but the two records I found don't even have Doyle in them. So
yeah,
so it's that whole, which end of the spectrum do we care about? Do we care about more the character or the person that created the character?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I don't know. For my chair, it's just, how do you have Sherlock Holmes without at least a 700 entry for Conan Doyle? But I don't know. All entries or all items are different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't they all be the same? It would make my life so much easier. All right. So
good discussion.
Yeah. Thanks, folks. I like to at least have a little bit of discussion on some topic, because you all have great ideas and we need to hear what they are. So before we get on to preaching at you with general reminders, just a few, and I think we'll be able to get through these rather quickly, but we have, in the continual effort to try and not have duplicate bib records when we don't need to have them, one of the things that we find discrepancies on, when we're matching, is pagination, and there's been some question about what is the actual matching standard for these things. And so I've got the link here, hopefully. Let's bring up the standards. Are these the right standards?
Yes.
2015, revised by Cataloging Committee 2015. Okay, awesome. So if we go down here to pagination, this is what it says, right? Publisher and pagination must match. Yeah, okay. Sometimes there's a connection between the publishers. If the page numbers match, great. If they don't, it may be due to a clerical error. And the example that they give are, additional pages at the end of the book. I don't necessarily think that is so much our problem. Sometimes, you have page numbers that are hidden in the back and people miss them. I've noticed that sometimes. Incorrectly add these to the last printed page number. Yeah, if we have advertisements and stuff like that and other material at the end of the book that's not really part of the book's content, right? And RDA places a increased emphasis on content of the book matching, pagination matching, publisher matching. If you see numbers that are close and other criteria match, you should assume you have a match. Okay, what does close mean? If numbers vary by more than a few, you probably don't have a match. Okay. Is that as tied down as we like? No, but what is a few? Is a few 3? Is a few less than 5? Certainly, I would not, in my mind, and I'm not the be-all, end-all, but more than 5, discrepancy in pagination, that to me is not a few.
I would agree.
What I've always heard and what I have shared when I've done trainings is 10.
So if we're in between 5 and 10,
That it shouldn't be greater than 10.
well, I would agree. It shouldn't be greater than 10. I'm not sure about in between 5 and 10 if we're talking about substantial different content there. Now, if that's the consensus, then I just want to get a little bit more clarification on what this means.
I don't know that that's the consensus.
Okay.
I'm just sharing what I have seen, heard in the past, and what I have shared previously in trainings.
Mm-hmm. So if you, I can say this definitively though. If we have less, if we have a few, if we have underneath 5 for sure, we have seen duplicate records where there's 1 or 2 page difference, and we're creating duplicate records because of that. So just as a reminder, if it's in that gray area, you might want to get some additional consultation. But I mean, definitely, if we're less than 5, I mean, I don't think there's any question. If we're less than 5, then you've got a match with all of the other information. I mean, this is if the only discrepancy we're talking about is pagination here. Once again, to try and get our duplicate bib numbers down. Hardback, paperback editions, yeah, sometimes we see that, right? Sometimes people create a whole new paperback record when they don't need to. I think we all know that if we have a hardback record, and you'll see oftentimes that information in the verso, right? You'll see, this paperback edition, even though the copyright date corresponds to the hardback, which came out last year or 2 years ago or whatever. And in that case, adding the paperback ISBNs with a subfield Q clarifying that it's the paperback, that's often another case. We had talked about transcribing fields, at least as it.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Can we go back to the hardback, paperback editions?
Yes.
That's also where we have used that editions may vary statement, because sometimes people are a little leery about adding the paperback because the quote-unquote publication date is different than the copyright. So that is part of the reason we have used that statement, just to make it a little bit more flexible with that, because oftentimes, and I know it isn't always the case with patrons, but oftentimes the patrons don't care if it's paperback or hardback if they can read it.
Right, I would agree. They usually don't care. I don't get many patrons coming up to the desk saying, I insist upon the hardback. Now, sometimes, print size, yeah, sure, but a hardback versus a paperback, oftentimes they don't care.
Well, and we are not talking here either mass market paperbacks. That is an entirely different ball of wax completely.
So just now that brings up another question, Dia, about the two date disparities. Are they doing that additions may vary instead of the information up in fixed field? Or are they doing that in addition to
Generally,
two dates in fixed field?
Generally, what my understanding was when we created this policy was that we would use the hardcover because that usually is the first edition that's printed. And then we would just add, but we wouldn't necessarily change the publication information. Other than you might put a 500 statement saying. But I have rarely seen that.
Right.
Usually it's just that editions may vary statement, and that's left at that.
And, you know, I know we say this over and over and over and over, but that's also, you know, please don't just do your ISBN search, do your title author search, because you may be holding a paperback and there might be a perfectly suitable bib record for the hardback that you can attach yours to, which won't return a result with just a simple ISBN search.
If you make it a habit of always doing a follow-up search if you don't find something the first time, whether it's you start with the ISBN and go to title author, or you start with the title author and go to ISBN, it's going to save you a lot.
It's what I do, and it's a good habit to get into.
Exactly.
264, 250 transcribe fields. In RDA, those are transcription. So you may see, you know, an AACR2 record, for example, where they won't be transcribed, where they'll be, you know, recorded. The information will be taken from the book, but it's not exactly as it is on the book. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a candidate for matching, is all that means. 250 edition field and 264 publisher field. Transcribed in RDA, but the record you might be looking at might be different, but you might still have a match. That's all that's there for. Just a reminder for that.
John,
Yeah.
If we are looking at a hardcover book and it has a hardcover edition statement in it, but our paperback matches it, do we retain the 250 or remove it?
Well, that would be what Dia mentioned earlier. If you're attaching your paperback edition and it has a different paperback edition statement, that's what you're saying, right? Or am I misunderstanding?
Or potentially, but the pages match, the size matches, it's the same publisher, essentially the same content, but I don't have the hardcover edition in front of me, but I want to attach it to this bib. The editions may vary, statement is in the 500, but what do we do with the 250?
Well, this is a question I actually raised a while ago, whether or not, just like, and folks, this isn't set policy here. I'm not necessarily saying do this, don't do this, but the question was raised whether or not we would add that additional 250 edition statement just like we add the 020 ISBN fields. So I have a paperback in my hand, has different ISBN. I add that as additional 020 fields. If I have a 250 paperback edition statement in the book in front of me that differs from the record, do I then add that edition statement? Because you can have repeatable, the 250 field is repeatable. I mean, in our OPAC results, you're only going to see the first one, but do I add that because I've determined that it matches that bib record despite the difference in the edition statement? Because we all know that edition statements don't mean as much now as they used to, right? Now somebody buys the rights to something and all of a sudden it's a new edition. Well, no, it's not. It's the same content, it's the same thing, just a different edition statement. So that is something that's on the table. I may revisit that in a mentor meeting, whether or not we want to encourage adding those additional 250 edition statements. I think there are pros and cons. The pros are that that's additional information for other catalogers that could be helpful, that have the same edition, wondering whether or not they can attach to that record. We might end up with 5, 6 edition statements that don't denote any difference in the content. I haven't seen that, but the potential could exist for that. So anyway, that is a long-winded non-answer to your question, Beth.
Okay.
It's something that I'd like to revisit again in a mentors meeting, and I advocate for that, but I'm not going to speak for everybody else and say in a committee meeting that that is now SAGE policy, because I am not a dictator. At least not yet. Just kidding, folks.
Of course.
Of course.
He's really not.
I don't want to be either. Okay. Does anybody else have any more matching standards, clarifications, questions? Let's get our duplicate bib records down, is the point. Okay. We have just a few minutes left, but let's talk about everyone's favorite, young adult fiction as a subdivision or as a field in itself. I have 4 different examples up here of things that we've seen for young adult fiction and what is correct, what isn't correct. I've got a 650 subject heading, topical subject heading, subfield A, young adult fiction, second indicator 0. I've got a 650 second indicator 0 subfield A, rockets, aeronautics. I just picked that as an example. Subfield V, young adult fiction. I've got 655 genre form heading, second indicator 7, subfield A, young adult fiction, with the LCGFT tag on the end of it. And then I have genre form 655 second indicator 0, subfield A, young adult fiction. Okay, how about this one on top here? 650 subject heading young adult fiction. Is that right? The question is that an authorized topical heading, right?
And the answer is no.
The answer is no. Are you sure? Now, this, when would you use this, folks? Because I think this is what Dee was hinting at. When would you use this? This is for a book that is about young adult fiction, right? The history of young adult fiction in America, right? Because this is a topical subject heading. This is not a genre form heading, right? Did I lose everybody? I think I did.
I agree. I'm the same way with large print. I hate it when I see it in the 650. I want to see it in the 655.
Right.
But I might be wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a different matter. We'll do that one next time. But if the book,
Oh no.
if the, yeah, that'll be a long discussion. If the book is about rather than is, right, topical versus genre form, because this is an authorized Library of Congress subject heading. This is a legit subject heading. The question is, do we use this for the typical young adult fiction that we would see as a genre in our library collections? Probably not, right?
Shouldn't.
Shouldn't.
Correct. Yes.
How about this?
Can we-
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we take it out if it comes in?
Can you take that if it comes in?
If we
it's-
import a record that has that and it is not about young adult fiction, but is indeed a young adult fiction genre, can we take that wrong subject heading out?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
yes.
you.
Yes.
Thank
But
you. I'm
just
so
make-
hesitant to take the subject headings out, all of our discussions, we try as much as possible if they are traceable and all of this good stuff. But when you come up against something like this, where it's accepted, obviously, in other libraries,
Mhm.
not SAGE necessarily, we're supposed to hesitate before we just rip them out.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I always pause for a minute. But okay, if I'm deleting this, am I supposed to delete this? What is my rationale for deleting this? Is it right? How about this? How about young adult fiction as a subheading? Subfield V, young adult fiction. Because we see this all the time with juvenile literature, right? Juvenile fiction, fiction.
I'm not sure that it is a free-floating subdivision.
Right. So, if this works, here is the Library of Congress free-floating subdivisions list, all 87 pages in it. So let's go down here and see. Do we have young adult fiction? If we do, then we can. Uh-oh, what do I got? I have youth, but that is what? Used as a topical subdivision. Further subdivided by subdivisions used in a class of persons. Topical subdivision under individual wars for works, aspects of the war in relation to youth. That's not that. So it is not an authorized subdivision in the free-floating subdivision. So can I use it as a subdivision? Watch what happens when I look up juvenile fiction. Oh, come on. I get this 260 subdivision note, right? Did I get that 260 subdivision note with young adult fiction?
We did not.
No, and it is not in the free-floating subdivisions list. This is not right, folks. Young adult fiction we can't use as a subfield V subheading, and we see this quite a bit. So if you are adding that on willy-nilly, shame on you, don't do that. So what do we do if we have something that's a legit genre form? Well, we've got a couple of genre form headings here. Which one do we use? Can we use any of them? And I've got 2 minutes left. I'm going to go through this quickly. If this is right, second indicator 7, young adult fiction, LCGFT, then this should be in that thesaurus, right?
Correct?
So if I look up the genre form thesaurus and I look up young adult fiction, what do I get? Zip zero nada. So, is this right? No, the answer is no. This is not right. This is not right either. Don't use young adult fiction in the genre form thesaurus.
Wow. Thank you.
Yep,
This is really good information.
You're welcome.
Because we'll have to, you see it so much and you do, some of your assumptions as a beginning cataloger, or, after you see this so many times, like you said, you're seeing it so much, rather than taking the initiative to go ahead and trace that, especially when somebody goes ahead and even tags it like it's real. That's like our form of fake news.
How about juvenile fiction? Juvenile fiction
Nothing.
isn't in there either. So if you're using juvenile fiction, now that's a legit subfield V.
Right.
But
But
it is
not
also
a genre.
Here. Right. So make
Right.
sure
Okay.
if you use a genre form, second indicator 7, subfield 2 LCGFT, make sure it's actually in that thesaurus. Yes, go ahead.
Right.
I was going to ask if it's in the other thesaurus, the GSAFD.
GSAFD. I don't search that very
Ooh,
often.
good question.
Well, juvenile fiction is in the H1095, which I put a link to.
Right. So it has a, in the authority that we read, it's a legit subdivision is a subfield V.
Right.
Which is what you're talking about, right? So that is completely appropriate if we were to put it here, juvenile fiction, that is, rather than here.
Yes. Yeah, but I always check that because it's just a nice, easy list to go, oh, is young adult there or not? And I don't have to search for anything. I just pull up the document. The last one was updated last month. So.
Thank you.
Let's see. I have not searched this at all. Juvenile fiction? Is that what I'm looking? No, I'm looking for young adult fiction.
Correct, yes. I was just curious because I hadn't looked recently.
I don't see that. Juvenile fiction. So, I don't see that one either. So, guess what, folks? How can we use this? 655, second indicator 0, meaning it's a legit Library of Congress, which it is, right? Oops. It is a legitimate heading.
As a subject.
Right, as a subject, as a topical heading, right? Now, oftentimes there'll be a scope note. For some reason, they've decided not to include a helpful scope note in young adult fiction, which they did, the way they do in other topical headings that can be used as 655. Like if you look up short stories, for example, it will say, here are entered works of blah, 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 as opposed to here are works about. Here are works of. And unfortunately, young adult fiction doesn't have that supporting scope note, but it is a legitimate Library of Congress heading. So this is how we have chosen to use this heading. 655, second indicator 0, young adult fiction. Okay, I didn't quite get through that by noon. Sorry, folks. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I should have put general cataloging and web client stuff ahead of time. I will just, I'll send out this in the minutes when Heather does her minutes, this upgrade page here. If you haven't gone and looked at the upgrade page, please do so. It has a lot of great information on our current, or on our future web client upgrade installation that's happening next month. So anyway, 3 minutes after, sorry for being late. Does anybody have anything else for the good of the cause before I send you all off to lunch?
It was a good meeting.
Going twice. All right, thanks everybody. I will send you back to your very busy cataloging job. See you later.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Dia. Thanks, John, with just the O. Mr. Brockman?
Yes, Lisa.
Okay, because this is going to sound like probably argumentative or confrontational, but the 655/0 young adult fiction, I have another question, so I won't take up everybody's time, but that, would we consider using a $7 local tag? Because there again, that 0 to me tells me, yes, it's traced. We have identified it's traced as a subject heading pertaining to the subject matter of the book. We have verified it is not a genre traceable, authorized. Would it be okay? Would we consider using the /$7 to local? Because for me, that kind of sets me up for a constant. Now that I know to trace the young, I'm already upset about not tracing the young adult fiction and confirming it for myself. I am so sorry. I saw it too many times and never even dreamed of it. Whereas I have traced the large print, and you know what I mean? So anyway, or have I not traced the large print? Are you telling me now the large print's not there either?
Well,
Oh no.
we will tackle that one.
That's a bad one, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying. But
no,
anyway, I was
if
just curious why we didn't talk about putting a 7 local there.
If we
Curious.
have an authoritative source, which we do, there's no reason to go into local land. The more we can steer away from local land and stick to authoritative sources like Library of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like I said,
so
the main frustration for me is the lack of scope note here, which is the using thing. Here are works of such and such a genre, which we see with other Library of Congress authorized topical terms where the scope note clearly says that it can be used as a genre. Okay. If this young adult fiction was not an authorized Library of Congress heading, it would be a different discussion.
Right. So. Okay. So using the 0 though, so what that's actually indicating, it is saying, yes, it is indeed in the Library of Congress authorities. That's all that's saying right there,
yes,
that 0.
The confusing part is the 150.
Right. Transferring them is not supposed to happen. I also understand we're not supposed to use the 655s for the 650s. I get that completely.
Yes.
Right. Awesome. Okay, well then that makes perfect sense, and I appreciate that extra. I didn't want to take up everybody's time for one quick little click I needed in my brain, so thank you. And now I'm going to go research my large print authorities.
Have fun.
Everybody have a, well, thank you, and you guys have a really good day too. This was a good meeting. Thank you.
All righty. Bye, y'all.